Welcome to Latin for Beginners. This course uses a traditional method of classical Latin instruction which emphasizes reading skills. This makes it possible to start with a classic public domain textbook, Latin for Beginners by Benjamin L. Duge, and boost its effectiveness with an online tool that greatly increases the number of exercises accompanying each lesson. The text may be found at gutenberg.org. A link is in the video description. The online tool, as well as additional resources and materials for the course, may be found at selfstudyclassics.com. This video covers Lesson 2 of the text. If you haven't read over that portion of the text, please stop and do so now. That way you'll get the most out of the time you spend watching. Lesson 2 is our first real exposure to Latin vocabulary, forms, and syntax. It is a gentle introduction, but enough to construct some simple sentences. In this video, we will work some example sentences to nail down the concepts in the lesson. First, let's try translating some Latin sentences into English using the concepts from the lesson. Our first sentence is nauta portat. We'll take it word by word. Nauta is a noun. It is singular in form, ending in a and not ae. At this point, we have only learned to use nouns as subjects of sentences, so it's safe to assume that this is the subject. Because it was one of our vocabulary words, we know it means a sailor. But it could also mean the sailor. Until now, we have been treating the words a and the as if they were parts of the nouns they travel with. Technically, they are the indefinite and definite article, and Latin does not have them. As translators, we are free to decide whether a sailor or the sailor works better with the context as a translation of nauta. Moving on, we identify portat as the verb. Its form is singular, as it ends in t instead of nt, so it agrees with the subject nauta, as it must, since that is the only candidate for subject in the sentence. Portat was another of this lesson's vocabulary words, and its meaning is does carry. Of course, it could also be is carrying, or carries. These three forms of the English verb in the present are called the present emphatic, present continuous, and simple present. Latin has only one form to correspond to all three of these, so again, as translator, we are free to choose from among them according to our sense of the context. The sailor carries is where we end up at last. Here is our next Latin to English example, portant agricolae. As with the first, we'll take it word by word. This sentence demonstrates the relative flexibility of Latin word order, as the order of subject and verb are reversed. Portant, the verb, comes first. It ends in nt, so its form is plural. The sense of the root is to carry, so in the plural we have our choice of do carry, or are carrying. Because the verb form is plural, we should look for a noun, in the plural, as the subject, and we find it in agricolae, which we may render as farmers or the farmers. At the conclusion of our process, we have the farmers are carrying. Now for one more Latin to English example. Amant. Let's analyze this. Well, it's just one word, and it is a verb. It's got the plural ending. So what does the text tell us to do when we don't see a subject? We've got to infer a pronoun subject from the verb form because the subject and the verb will always agree in person, meaning whether they are first, second, or third person, and number, meaning whether they're singular or plural. Now, the only verb forms that we have looked at so far are third-person verb forms. That means we haven't looked at any sentences in which the subject is I or we, the first-person pronouns, or you, the second-person pronoun. So if there is no noun available as the subject, the pronouns that we might infer are he, she, it, or they. Those are the third-person pronouns. Of course, the one that is plural, in other words, the only one that agrees with the verb in number as well as in person, is they. So the subject must be they, and we interpret amant as they are loving, or they do love, or they love. So in the end, we are left with they love. Now it's time to go from English to Latin. The daughter loves. We'll take it bit by bit, just as we did with the Latin. We know from our time spent on grammar in Lesson 1 that daughter is a noun, and it is the subject of this English sentence. It signifies one thing as opposed to multiple, so it is singular. The word for daughter from our vocabulary is philia, and we can keep it in the singular form. We can forget about the word the. Loves is a verb, and the form we choose for it in Latin needs to match the subject in number. In other words, because the subject is singular, the form of the verb needs to be singular. The word from our vocabulary that means loves is amat, and we can leave it in its singular form. So we have philia amat, but keeping in mind the flexibility of Latin word order, we should also note that we could have amat philia. The meaning is the same. The difference is one of emphasis. The choice depends on whether one wants to emphasize that it is the daughter doing the loving, or that it is loving that the daughter is doing. If someone asked, for example, whether it is the son or the daughter that is loving, one might respond philia amat, to emphasize that it is the daughter and not the son. On the other hand, if someone asked whether the daughter is loving or hating, one might respond amat philia, to clarify that loving and not hating is what the daughter is doing. Here is our next English to Latin example. Ladies are announcing. Ladies is a noun and the subject. Its form, the S on the end, tells us it's plural. We know the Latin word for lady is domina. To make it plural, we have to change the ending from a to I, which gives us dominae. Our announcing is a verb, and it must have the plural form in Latin because the subject is plural. Announces in Latin is nuntiat. To change that from singular to plural, we change the T ending to an NT ending, and we have nuntiant. So the complete sentence in Latin is dominae nuntiant. Or nuntiant dominae. It's up to us as translators. Okay, one more English to Latin. He does carry. We immediately run into a problem if we try to analyze this word by word since we don't know the Latin for he. The key is to note that it's a pronoun, and that it's the subject of the English sentence. Pronouns as subjects do not need to be explicitly included in the Latin. They may be implied by the verb form. In order to decide which form to use, it helps to note that the pronoun is singular. In other words, one of he, she, or it, instead of they, which is the plural third-person pronoun. Does carry is our verb. We know the Latin form should be singular to agree with the subject, and the Latin for carries is portat, and we can leave it in its singular form. Not needing a word for the subject means we are left with a one-word sentence, portat. There is another kind of practice we can do, and that is to take Latin sentences and change their number. Let's take this sentence, which has a singular subject, and make the subject plural. Puella pugnat. Making puella plural is easy enough. We simply have to change the singular ending a to the plural ending ae. To complete the transformation, however, we need to make the verb agree with the subject. We change the singular verb form ending of t to nt, and we have a complete transformation to plural. Puellae pugnant. Now let's try the reverse. Here we have a sentence with a subject that's plural. Aquae portant. We can make the aquae singular by changing the I ending to a. Now to make the subject and verb agree. By changing the plural ending nt to just t alone. Aqua portat. That concludes our examples illustrating the concepts in Lesson 2. The best way to achieve mastery of these concepts is to work a lot of exercises, and you can find plenty over at selfstudyclassics.com. Head to the practice section and choose Lesson 2. Once you feel confident about the Lesson 2 material, check out the video on Lesson 3 of Latin for Beginners. Thanks for watching.